Hi, I'm Colleen McKinnon. As Elaine noted, I'm a board member, but have been a board member for a number of years. I'm also an educator and parent of someone who went through our school systems a number of years ago. Did you want me to go into the...
No, we're going to talk about this.
Okay, so just want to welcome you all for taking another night out. I know it's a beautiful night, and you could probably think of a lot of other things to do, so we're really grateful for you taking the time to be here tonight.
I'd like to share with you our plan for the evening. As you can see here, you just met the superintendents, and we're going to talk about the ways we'd like to work tonight. The actual agenda is in a few moments after we've kind of laid out the evening. We're going to hear a PowerPoint presentation by Superintendent John Barone. He will talk to us about the themes that the superintendents at the first 3 forums have heard, and along with all the written feedback they've received. So he'll share some themes from that, and then he'll share with you the background of how this proposed calendar came to be. After he has given his PowerPoint presentation, we're going to spend the bulk of the evening in time to hear from you. So your comments, your questions, there are 2 standing microphones here set up, and that really will be your time. Probably 45 minutes, if not longer, of our time tonight will be in hearing from you. And there are sign-in sheets at the table outside if you would like to be on the speakers list. A little bit later, I'll be taking those sheets and I'll be calling out names, and people will come up and speak. And we'll hear from as many people as we can. Depending on how many people wish to speak, we might not get to everyone, I can tell you, but hopefully we'll get to hear from a very wide variety of folks. When it is time to speak, we're hoping, again, to hear the range of opinions out there and the range of ideas. So if you feel as though your opinion or your idea has already been well represented, and your name comes up on the speaker list, you can just pass and not come to the mic. So that we can really hear the widest variety.
So there, as you've already heard, this is the, pardon? Yeah. As you've already heard, this is the 4th forum, and we really do want to hear voices. The sign-up sheets are outside, and we'll move forward. What we're looking for is to hear as many diverse perspectives as possible. We really are interested in what you have to say. We'd ask for you to speak for yourself, not for others. It would be helpful for us to perhaps know where you're from if that's important to you. We would welcome that. And, we're here, what's great about our communities is that it's an opportunity for us to share different perspectives in a way where we can really do some active listening, and that's our approach tonight, is to do some active listening.
So, with all of that said, it's time to hear from Superintendent John Barone. You want to use this one?
Sure, if you don't mind. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I want to try something. Can folks hear me without the microphone? In the back, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I've got more technology on me with wireless mics and cell phones, so I'm going to try to do this without the microphone, but if you need me to pick up the microphone, please let me know, and I am going to walk around as I speak tonight. Thank you all very much for being here this evening. It's really great to see the turnout. As you heard, I'm the superintendent for the Miltontown School District. I'm going to share just a few opening comments with you tonight, and then I'll share a PowerPoint that has some background. I'll try to limit the amount of time that I talk because we really want to hear from you folks. That's the purpose of tonight. I want to be clear with you tonight about my role. My role tonight in speaking on behalf of my colleagues, on behalf of the superintendents from the Champlain Valley region, is I and the superintendents are not here tonight to try to convince you that our proposal, Calendar 2.0, is the end-all, be-all. I'm not going to do that tonight. At the same time, I'm also not going to stand before you and try to convince you that this is not a good proposal. My role tonight is to present to you the facts. I'm going to take you through our thinking, the process that we have used in coming up with this proposal, some of the background information, but I promise you that my role is not to try to convince you, nor is my role to dissuade you. My role is to present the facts to you, and that's what I'll do tonight. We're very excited for the turnout. We're very eager to hear your comments, and we appreciate the comments that we have received to date, whether it's been at the previous 3 forums or if it's been through the blog spot or emails or personal conversations. We really appreciate your feedback. Now, having said that, we know, as the regional superintendents, that there has been some communication out already about this proposal. And you will hear me say this from time to time tonight, that this is a proposal. Having said that, we also know as superintendents that there's been some miscommunication. And we own some of that. I'll admit it. We own some of the miscommunication. Some of the miscommunication that I'd like to share with you tonight is that Calendar 2.0 has been a done deal since the beginning, since its inception. I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that is a misconception. It has not been a done deal. We have not officially voted as regional superintendents to adopt this calendar. As a matter of fact, based upon the feedback that we have received, not only from the 3 forums, but also through emails and blog spots, I can tell you and I can assure you that as superintendents, we did meet this Tuesday, we did vote, and we voted to take this proposal, to not go forward with this proposal for 2014-2015. We are listening. No, not yet. Let me go, and then there'll be time when you come to the microphones. Hold on. I appreciate the eagerness. See, it's like teaching moment. Now I lost my... No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I also want to tell you a couple of other misconceptions. At no time has Calendar 2.0, this proposal, been a proposal to lead us to year-round schooling. That's been a lot of the information that folks that I have spoken with have been worried about, that this is just an attempt to lead us to year-round schooling. Absolutely not. That is not the case. Again, we have to own as superintendents that there has been some miscommunication. Another miscommunication has been that we did not want to hear or involve parents. We did not want to hear or involve community, teachers, and students. I assure you that that is a miscommunication. That's what these forums are for. That's what the blog spot has been for, and that's why we're listening to your feedback. So with that being said, before I jump into the background or go any further into our thinking, I want to set a context, but I need your help. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. You have to do something tonight. It's the former teacher in me. First of all, I have to walk around as a former classroom teacher, and I can't just talk without giving you something to do, so forgive me. Here's what I want you to do. For those of you in the room tonight that are, let me say it this way. Those of you in the room tonight that are not school-aged, that are not currently in school, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to think back for a moment. Think back to what it was like when you were students. Think about what your school day was like. Think about what the school year was like. And just think for a moment about what it was like to be a student. Don't say anything. Now, if you are a student in the room, and I see a few students here tonight, and thank you for coming. If you are a student in the room, I want you to do the same thing. I want you to think about what is it like to be a student? What is your day like? What is the year like? What does it feel like to be a student? So I want you to think just for a moment. Wow, impressive. All right, now here's what you have to do. I want you to turn and talk. Hold on, don't go yet. I want you to turn and talk to the person sitting next to you, and I just want you to share your memories. I want you to share the answer to my question. What was it or what is it like to be a student? Now, before you start, hold on. I'm not asking you, this is not an opportunity to talk about Calendar 2.0 or the proposal or whether you agree or disagree. Please stay with the question and take a few minutes and just talk about your memories of being a student. Go. Okay, I'm going to use this just to bring us all back together. Great, thank you. I asked you to do that tonight so that you would have that context, that conversation in your minds as we move forward. Because now that you've had a chance to talk about what your memories were, let's talk for a moment about what it's like now. What is 21st century education like now? So you had a chance to do the context and have a conversation. I want to share a little bit with you. We live in an age of public accountability. We all know that. We are required annually to report out our student progress on standardized test scores and our school's progress on standardized test scores. That is a requirement under federal law. We have to do that. More than 70% of the schools in Vermont are labeled as not making AYP, adequate yearly progress. Whether we agree or disagree with the assessment, whether we agree or disagree with the mechanism, the reality is we have to report out annually, and more than 70% of our schools are identified currently as not making AYP. Some of our districts are already underway with the implementation of the new Common Core standards. Those will be fully implemented next year, a set of national standards. Right behind that in the spring will be the onset of a brand new assessment, the Smarter Balanced Assessment, which actually I'm excited about because I think it's going to revolutionize the way we assess student learning. Colleges and universities have been pushing back on public education for a number of years because what we're hearing from college and universities is that they are having to offer more and more remedial classes to entering freshmen. We're hearing that. We're also hearing from our business community. Our business community, especially the technology side, is telling us that recent graduates do not have the skills potentially, or specifically in mathematics, to meet the requirements for basic skills in the world of technology. We know that. We've been hearing that. There's a lot of research about regression. There's a lot of research that talks about regression and students after a long summer vacation, how they regress in their learning. Okay, we know that. We also know, sitting in this room, all of us, we have an economy. We have an economy right now that requires, in most households, both parents or both guardians to be working. We also know that in a number of our communities, a number of our high school students in particular are working long hours, not only to save up for college, but we also know that the reality is that in some cases, they're working to help support their households. Okay, we know that. We have teachers' contracts throughout the region that span the number of work days, anywhere from 176 days to as high as 189 days. So that, to me, really does bring into the question, do we really have common regional calendars with that much variance around the regions? As educational leaders of your schools, I want to assure you that as superintendents, we've been talking about all of these issues for a long time. The calendar proposal that you're going to see is just one piece of work that we've been doing. It's not the only thing that we've been doing, but it's one solution, it's one idea that we've been talking about to attempt to address some of these concerns. In working on the proposal that I'm going to show you in just a couple of moments, we have looked at other states around the U.S., and we've looked at their different school calendars. We've looked internationally at other school calendars from other countries to see what are they doing. Because as you did and as we just talked about, we know that the society that we're in now has different needs than the society did when our current school year calendar was created well over 100 years ago. It's been really exciting for my colleagues and I over the past 2 weeks to have these forums, to get your feedback, to engage the community about education, to engage the community about what is best for student learning. Look at this auditorium tonight. Look at the number of people who have turned out to talk about education. This is exciting to us. As you heard me say earlier, we have been listening. To date, we have reviewed the comments on the blog spot. We have reviewed several of the comments that have come from the forums. And as I said to you, we voted as a group on Tuesday to take Calendar 2.0 and not move it forward, at least for 2014-2015. Now, I've been asked several times in the last few hours, what does that mean? Are you just going to push it back on us? Is that coming back up? And I'm going to answer you honestly with that. We don't know. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you honestly, we don't know yet. Because there's this fourth forum. We're anxious to hear your comments. We're anxious to get your feedback. And then in November, my colleagues and I will sit down. We'll go through all of your comments, and we will decide how we move forward. Clearly, though, what we have heard is that if we move forward, we need to expand the number of people working on this concept. We've heard that. I want to assure you of that. So, with all that being said, let me take you for a very brief walk through a concept, a proposal. A proposal. So here it is. We'll start by looking at what the law says. There are some constraints that we have to work under. Vermont law, Title 16 of the Vermont law, Section 1071E, mandates that superintendents of regions that are basically regionalized by technical centers, we are required by law to come up with a regional calendar that has a common 175 student days, that's the minimum, and the law also requires us to have 5 common professional development days. So in 2010, the Champlain Valley Superintendents Association charged a task force of 6 of us, 6 of the superintendents. And the charge to the task force was to look at our current calendar, study alternative models. Let's see what's out there. Are there alternative models around the country, around the world? Let's look at those alternative models, and let's come up with, the 6 of us, a recommendation for a calendar based upon certain agreed-upon principles, which I'm going to share with you in just a moment, and that build upon what the Agency of Education in Vermont has adopted, a document called the Agenda for World-Class Education. The 6 of us on this task force set a target goal. So we set a goal of the 2014-2015 school year. Again, I want to assure you folks, that was the target goal of the task force and not our intention to necessarily be ready to implement it for next year. It was a target to drive our work. So again, just wanted to reiterate and assure you, it was a task force goal. We have not made any final decisions. All right, so the guiding principles. If you picked up one of the green handouts on your way in, it's a back-to-back. One side has a side-by-side calendar, the other side has the guiding principles. Here are the principles that we used. We want to support the learning of all students, all of our students. We want to provide timely interventions and enrichments during the school year. We want to provide more effective instructional time. We want to increase access to language-rich environments, particularly for those students where English is not the primary language at home. And we really are attempting to minimize, our principles are to minimize the loss of learning. Folks, there are plenty of seats if you want to come in and sit down. Okay. And now they're going to thank me for pointing them out in the back of the room. Sorry about that. We want to support a positive school climate, distribute the pace of education in reasonable chunks, maintain and promote academic momentum, and schedule timely teacher professional development during non-student days. One of our goals in this is the thought of, with all of the work that's ahead of us with Common Core and new assessments, can we minimize the amount of time that we're pulling teachers out of the classroom and have that professional development activity during the intersession time, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So, as a task force, we came up with Calendar 2.0. Calendar 2.0 maintains the 175 student days, and it does preserve some of the traditional student vacations. Those of us that worked on this calendar, on this task force, believe that the calendar distributes student days more evenly. We talked about embedding weather days. So instead of when we have snow days, or in last year's case, hurricane days or possible hurricane days, and we had to close school, could we embed those into the calendar so that that last day of school is a true last day of school? Just our thinking. The intercessions, dedicated blocks of time. So here's what we came up with. And I apologize, it's a little difficult to see in this setting, but you have it on the green handout. With you looking at the screen to our left is the current regional 2013-2014 school year calendar. This may look slightly different than the school calendar in your individual districts because remember, this is regional. And we have to set this regionally. On our right is the proposed Calendar 2.0. You'll notice that it does have students coming back 5 days earlier in August, and it does have students ending the third week of June. Having said that, in many of our districts and SUs around this region, because of snow days, a number of us actually ended pretty close to that day anyway. We did build in what are called some intercessions. This calendar still maintains the 175 common days as required by law. Let's talk about those intercessions briefly. What could we use them for? If you've been following the governor and the current Secretary of Education and what's happening at the legislature, you'll see that there has been a big push for personalized learning for all students. Would this be an opportunity to do this? Reteaching or interventions for struggling learners. Engaging with experts. Our thought around this was, for middle school and high school students, what about the possibility of taking middle school and high school students and having them do community-based internships in areas that they might be interested in pursuing post-secondary education? This is some of our thinking. A balance between, this would allow for balancing between school activities, jobs, and home life, and can we offer accelerated learning opportunities for students who need those? For teachers, would this be an opportunity for teachers to be analyzing student data, to do more collaborative planning and preparation, to customize personalized learning, to involve partnerships with community, and could this mean less time for teachers out of the classroom? What about for families? Well, our thinking was, would this evenly distribute time to accommodate appointments and extended family trips? One of our goals in building the intercessions, could it mean that maybe parents wouldn't be pulling students out of school to extend the February break or for a break in October and taking students out of school so they're missing instructional time and plan during the intercessions? Would this help improve the balance between school and family life? Access to quality childcare in your neighborhoods and your communities, and would this provide an opportunity for families to take advantage of Vermont's 4 seasons?
There are 2 seasons.
I know, but So there are some logistics. There are absolutely some logistics involved in this. And I'm sure that the logistics we worked on, or that have been driving our conversations, are what you're going to want to talk about tonight. Here are some of those logistics. Quality childcare. What about working families? We know that. We understand this. I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that we're not promoting change just for the sake of change. This was one of the biggest things that we talked about as well. What about childcare for working families? What about enrichment activities? The difference between remediation versus acceleration. Who will those students be? Who will be teaching them? Do we make it a mandatory requirement? If it's not a mandatory requirement, how do we get students to come to these without it traumatizing students, or without it singling students out who need the interventions or the acceleration? We understand that. What about professional development? Do we require teachers? Do we make it voluntary? Do we have to pay them more? Transportation. How are we going to get kids to and from these intersessions? What are going to be the costs? Is there going to be additional costs for taxpayers? Or can we use our existing resources and federal grant money and think differently about that? I assure you, folks, those same conversations that I know are in your minds tonight, we've been talking about. Air conditioning. Air conditioning. Let's be honest. Start of school, of course, we always get Indian summer. We can count on that. We know the temperature is going to be in the 80s and 90s, and we know what that means for learning in our schools. We know that. That's been one of these needs that we've been talking about as well. Uh-oh. There we go. On July 23rd, 2013, at Essex High School, we held what we called a partnership summit. And we invited in 64 folks. We actually invited in more, but 64 folks attended. And this was an opportunity to have a summit with community partners. So specifically, folks from rec departments, folks from family coalitions, private daycare providers. Several people, 64 regional people came to the table, came to Essex High School, representing 13 statewide and cross-regional partners. We had 18 after-school programs there. We had 7 superintendents in the room, and 6 libraries from across the region were represented. And what we talked about is, how can we work together? If this proposal should go forward, how can we work together to look at regional and local resources, because we know that there are some communities that do not have the same resources that I may have in Milton or you folks have here in CVU. We know that. So what could be done regionally? What would be the opportunity for these partnership organizations to create new programs or expand their current programs? And what about funding? Is there funding available through grants or regional resources so that this wouldn't become a cost burden to families? How can we align this with our local schools? For example, just to explain what that means, in my district, I've been talking with my rec department and coalition that if this calendar were to go forward and we were to have intersessions, let's say 3 days a week, and they went from 8 to 11:30, could, whether it's the coalition in my community or any of the other services, could they then offer programs that started at 11:30? So that a student went from an intersession into a program that provided lunch, stayed until 5:30, so that parents could pick them up after school and not have to leave work, go home, go to school, pick up the kids, go home, and then go back to work. How can we increase the use of our school facilities? So I just want to summarize. I've talked enough, and now we want to hear from you. I want to summarize to you that Calendar 2.0 is and was a proposal. It's one idea on the table. It still maintained the common 175 student days. We were not looking to go to year-round schooling. We used guiding principles, as you have and as you saw, with an attempt to improve the learning for all students. I assure you, this is not a done deal. Thank you for coming to the 4th of our 4 public sessions, and I assure you that we will take your feedback tonight, as with the other sessions, your blog comments and your continued comments, so that as superintendents, we are making informed decisions. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your great attention and patience as we're also waiting to hear from you. So this is the time for that. I have speakers lists here, and the way this will work is that I'm going to read the top 3 names. You can make your way to the microphones on either side, and then I'll continue to read names. So to give you a little bit of time to climb over each other so we're not waiting for each individual to come forward. So I'm going to do my best pronouncing names. Feel free to reintroduce yourself if I did a poor job. And also, it might, since I'm reading multiple names, it's possible that by the time you get to the mic, you'll be out of order, and then you can tell people who you are. And again, as Colleen suggested, if you'd like to tell people where you're from, that's fine as well. So the first 3 people who should come forward, if you're still wishing to speak, are Caitlin Waddick, Richard Eyre, and Pam Nash. If you have a comment, just a comment, then we'll move on to the next speaker. If you have a question, I'll turn the questions over to the superintendent.
I guess it's just me.
It's you.
I'm Pam Nash, and some of my questions are probably moot points. You've answered them already, or since it's currently off the table, they may just not even matter at this point. But I'm curious as to why you chose 2.0. I looked for research, and I wasn't able to find any, even on your website, that stated that this was actually better for the students, that when they had intersessions and these longer extended school years, that there were points in time where the students did perform better, but there were, if you looked at it over the course of the entire year, there was no statistical difference. So I was wondering about that. And then also, the impact on the students that aren't going to need extra help during the intersessions, if they're taking longer breaks. I know already if we have a 1-week spring vacation, when the kids get back to school, it takes a couple days for them to get back into the swing of things. And if they then have that much more time off, it's going to be that much longer before they're into it. And so this 2-week break becomes this even longer lag. And the kids who aren't doing work and aren't getting help are losing even more momentum. And in a way, it's hurting them, and it's interfering with their learning process. I was also wondering what the driving force behind this was. Does it have anything to do with the hope of receiving a school improvement grant? That if you have any of these changes, do you get a grant? And is that some of it, where it possibly came from? And also, if our students aren't performing as well, we have a 175-day calendar. We can have up to a 180-day calendar, and the average school calendar in the world, if you look at other countries, all over Europe, is 200 days or more. So instead of giving them the same number of days and spreading it out so they have more of a break, why not give them more school? Or I know in China they go to school from early in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Extend the school day, but give them breaks during the day.
Thank you. That's a lot to chew on. I forgot to mention, and I don't mean this in any way as a criticism of your very well-prepared comments, but I think I forgot to mention that we're trying to keep it to a 2-minute time limit in asking questions.
And a 2-minute time limit for superintendents as well? Equal time? Okay, great.
I do want to speak to the whole research piece of this. Really, it's a complicated answer. It's not a simple answer, is there research? There's research that says how the brain works. There's research about how human beings learn. And we've known that research for a long time. And it says that all of us do better if after we've learned something, we step away from it a little bit. We have time to assimilate, generalize. We're going to be better and understand things better if we don't just continue at something past a certain point. So some of that was what we were looking at. We do know that. There's no research that's ever going to ask parents, and I think this is an example of that. Would you mind half of you putting your kids in this calendar and half of you in this calendar, and oh, by the way, we'll have to decide which half is which because it'll have to be a control, and then we will do a study to see who does better. I mean, that just doesn't happen. Nobody would put up with that. So, you know, in a perfect world, what we were imagining in terms of the interventions is that we would have a system built into our school systems where, just like in the summertime we have summer programs, we would have programs, not just for the kids who needed academic support, but we would have enrichment activities going on. So some kids would be there for that, some kids would be getting interventions, and some families, as they do now, would be taking vacations with their kids, having them at home doing wonderful activities. We know that's a perfect world, and we know that there's a lot that needs to be worked on for that. In terms of school improvement grant, there was never any thought of any grant. I don't even know that such a thing exists. And what about more days? Here's one thing that we all can acknowledge. There is not more money for education. There is, you know, one of the things that we immediately decided was we couldn't possibly add days. Not without, I mean, going to our communities and asking for a ton more money. Every additional day is a lot more money. So, I mean, we were trying to stay within the parameters of what we have.
My name is Caitlin Waddick. I'm a parent and an educator, and I would like to see the CVSA withdraw this proposal in its entirety and not just put it on hold for next year, but formally declare that they're withdrawing it. CVSA has not been able to show that it has clear benefits, and there are actually some ways that it damages our children and is harmful. And I think a more balanced presentation would have shown both the advantages and disadvantages of your proposal, and it would have been even better if you had given equal time to another group who has clearly thought through some of the disadvantages of your proposal. One group that you may or may not know about is the Coalition to Save Our Summers. I'm not a spokesperson for that group. I do not speak on their behalf. But some of the people that I've heard from that group are very good speakers, and it would have been nice to have a 10-minute presentation from them, at least 10 minutes. For those who aren't familiar with the Coalition to Save Our Summers, they've put together a number of articles in Burlington Free Press and maybe Shelburne News and some other places. They have a Facebook page, and they're circulating a petition that has over 1,000 signatures already, asking for the complete, entire withdrawal of your proposal. Not like on hold for 2014, withdrawal. And I don't want to exceed my time here, but I'd really like to see educational reform, and I would like to see it in a democratic fashion, not autocratic from 14 people who we didn't even elect, but a really ground roots effort in which you go into the communities and have student voices, parent voices, teacher voices. I want to have real community schools where decision-making is transparent. These sorts of educational fads where superintendents in various parts of the country have these autocratic ideas that they want to impose, and they want to do it fast. They don't want to mess with school boards. They don't want to mess with PTOs. It's very insulting. And I think it's very disingenuous for you to come up here and say that you're not here to convince us when you haven't clearly laid out advantages and disadvantages of your proposal. So there's really, I'm disappointed. I'm ashamed of you.
Thank you. So the next names on the list are Sharon Lee Truffrey, Elise Zarias, something like that. And Richard Beer, I don't know if you wanted to still speak. Stephen Gladstone is coming up as well.
I'm Richard Eyre. There's studies showing that your type of calendar that has been tried in other places and has not worked. The University of West Virginia has done studies. So you're showing research. You're talking about research. There's research that says it doesn't work. It's been tested. So look at both sides. Don't just look at your side, what you're proposing, because I don't think that's, as this person said, you're an autocratic body trying to force this to a community, and I don't think that's right. get teachers involved, get parents involved. Originally, we were told that nobody was allowed to speak at these meetings, and that was documented in the Free Press, where you were only allowing written discussion. Obviously, you changed your tune, so maybe you're opening up a little bit, which is good. You need to open up a lot more.
Hi, Saras. From Shelburne, and very happy to be here. Really happy with the schools, and my concern is, what does the calendar really have to do with what's wrong with education? There's a lot of other ways and a lot of looking at curriculum, which I think you are doing with the core standards, and I'm really glad that that's happening. I think that the focus on math and technology is crucial to this country. And I think that looking at different teaching methods could be explored further. And I handed the gentleman from Essex some really interesting points that had been found that I think is worth reading and looking at. It's long, sorry. And I have had experience with full year schooling in another country, and it was horrible. It was just awful. My son was a year behind grade level when we moved back to this country, and he'd been going to school every day. I mean, having 2-week breaks throughout the year, and there was not enough flexibility in their curriculum, and there's not enough flexibility in their methods. So there was just really poor education over a long period of time. And I don't see how the calendar really affects children. I think it's what you do when you're in school. And you guys do it well. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I also forgot, there was a request here to reintroduce the superintendents. I'm going to let John Brown do that.
Sure. I know some folks came in late, so let me do that. I'll hand the mic down. I'm John Barone, the superintendent from the Milton Town School District.
Elaine, Pinckney, Superintendent, Chittenden South Supervisory Union.
Jay Nichols, Superintendent Franklin Northeast.
Jen Botso-Jordan, Assistant Superintendent at Chittenden East.
Everybody, I serve the community of Essex as the Superintendent Mark Andrews.
So we have one more speaker here, and then Suzanne Trost and Kristen Wright.
So I'm Steve Gladstone. I live here in Heinsberg. And what you say may make sense, it may be a great idea, but it's been a process, and my kids only go through the school one time, and I don't want to be the test bed for your programs and your ideas. I know it sounds selfish, but basically it's going to take some time. You're going to have to work it out, change it, modify it, and by the time you maybe get it right, my kid's going to be through, and I don't want it to be, you only live life once, and I don't want to be the test bed for this. So, sorry about that, but that's just my feeling.
So I'm Susanne Trost, and I want to speak actually pro the change in calendar. I'm from Germany. We have a different school year. And when my children here reached school age, I was kind of scared about the long summer vacation and got a handle on it. But when I heard about the proposed calendar change, it made a lot of sense for me. Didn't seem much of a problem. I thought everybody would be for it. Because of that, I think there's a well-documented notion that the gap of knowledge changes over those summer vacations. Students lose their knowledge to a certain degree, and some more than others. And I think it just widens the gap more and more. That has been shown in studies, not familiar with all of them. And so it would make sense to make those breaks shorter. I also know that I had a good experience in my school, and I had a good summer. They were a lot of fun. Germany is a vacation country. People go on vacation a lot. I don't think we miss out on summer. And I think 2 weeks of vacation throughout the school year are important to recharge. We cannot recharge in a week. It's way too short. Yes, it's going to be a change. So I lived through it. It's not scary for me. The 12-week vacation was much scarier. I think we need to think about the students and our future, not ourselves, not what we are used to. But, so that's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Gagne? No? Okay, moving down the list. Pat?
Say those
Oh.
names again.
So the people, Helena Donnelly, I think, Kristen Wright, Sue Slezar, and Michelle Gagne.
I'm Michelle Gagne. I live in Williston, and my husband's owned a house there since 1988, and I've lived there for 15 years. I have a lot of questions. One of the things is I'd like to answer Mr. Barone's question about thinking about when we were students, when we were in school. I remember being in school. I remember living for summer so I could work and I could read as many books as I wanted, have the summer free from having to answer to teachers. I still live for those days, and I sit there and I teach my children at home. This affects me as a taxpayer. I'm really concerned because you talk about teachers teaching during the intercession. We haven't heard from a lot of teachers. I'd really love to hear it, but I think they're waiting till it's time for them to vote on their contracts. And that concerns me because they could very well say, we're not going to do what you think we're going to do. And I'm concerned about that for the kids that I know that are in school, for my friends' children. I'm also concerned about the fact that I haven't heard anything about what you're making for accommodations for kids with special needs who really, as a mother of a child with Down syndrome, have a hard time with transitioning. She certainly, if she was in the school system, would never be able to sit there, take 2 weeks off, go back for 6 or 7, and then come back. It would be a nightmare in our house. I have a lot of friends who have kids with special needs in this system. I think it would be horrible for them. I don't see how this helps them to reach a better level of education. I see that, what concerns me is you guys have tasked yourselves with coming up with something to address education and to get a better outcome for AYP, but I don't know what else you've looked at because you really haven't answered that question for any of us. We talk about access to quality childcare. Who pays for this? The taxpayers. We talk about enrichment in libraries, and we talk about transportation to those intercessions. That's going to come out of my tax dollars because it's going to come out either in a school budget or it's going to come out in a town budget. And I really think we're taxed to death already, especially living in this area. And there's a bunch of people that went to school when I was in school. I graduated in '79. And I can honestly tell you that I was one of the economically disadvantaged students back then. I got A's and I got B's because I worked my butt off, because my parents encouraged me to work my butt off, and we sat there and managed to learn. There are a lot of engineers here, teachers here, professional people here, stay-at-home moms or dads. We all managed to learn under the old system, and for whatever reason, the new system and No Child Left Behind may have messed that up, but maybe we need to change that and not worry about changing our calendar.
Hi, I just wanted to respond to the question about including students and teachers in the process. And every SU has done it a little differently. And I think that the communities that have people that were on the original Calendar 2.0 task force probably spent more time with their communities than ones that weren't. And that's just the reality of it. And when we went through this process, the reason the forums were set the way they were, as that first initial conversation with parents. But I've surveyed, I presented to all my faculties in Franklin Northeast, Enosburg, Richford, Cold Hall Career Center, Montgomery, Bakersfield, and Berkshire, where I live, write that down. And teachers were given a survey afterwards to respond to, an anonymous survey. And we do a lot through surveys. And I'm actually going to release those results publicly. I haven't yet because Enosburg High School just barely had a presentation, so they need a little bit more time. And right now, so far, it's running almost about 67 to 70% that Calendar 2.0 is better than what we currently use. And the rationale behind it, I presented and said, I want you to answer the survey, not based on what's best for you as an adult, but what you honestly think would be best for kids. And this calendar, if we just change the 175 days, it's the same amount of days, and we switch the calendar around, the benefit of that will be very little. Honestly believe that. The key is if we use the intercessions and use them wisely. In our communities, we talked about running it through our 21st century after-school programs. So we could run accelerating learning things, camps and stuff for kids that wanted that. Kids that need extra academic instruction, we could give that to them in the morning. We could use our SES money, which is money we get from the feds as part of No Child Left Behind. And we could try to run programs like that for our kids. And also, I talked to my kids. I went to classrooms, presented it, and got feedback from the kids. And especially the AP kids, the kids you would think the most may not want it. Those kids are exhausted come October. They're sick of their teachers, they need a break. I have kids that go to Harvard, Dartmouth, places like that say they are so stressed out with the amount of work that they have come October, that they would like time off. They would love to have that week off. And teachers, if you ask them and really show them the schedule, so far in our SU, they're saying that this calendar is better. So I do want people to know that teachers and students have been part of the conversation.
I also, I saw that a bunch of students came in probably after sports events. If you would like to speak, or if any of you would like to speak now that the conversation is underway, but you didn't sign up to speak earlier, you can still do that back at the back table, and we're going to run back and get the new list of names. So if you'd like to do that, I encourage you to. Patty Drew, Richard Fox, Kim Servin, Carla Bond, if any of you would like to speak, this is the time to come forward.
Hi there, my name's Helena Dooley, and I just have a question. I'm curious if there's been an analysis of the potential costs with the change. It's a pretty significant change, and anytime there's a implementation of something like this, transportation's been mentioned, air conditioning, startup costs, shutting down the schools more often, and looking at those costs and maybe taking that chunk of money and maybe putting it towards additional summer enrichment programs for the students that really need it rather than shift everything up in the school year. Is there a way to more effectively use the resources we have?
Thank you. Well, I would just say that we were thinking about all of those things, reallocating resources. So there's not a one of us here that was thinking that we were going to go to our school boards and ask for more money to do this. We really were believing that if we stuck within the 175 days, reallocated the resources we already use for before school, after school, as Jay has said, some of the programs that we already have in our schools, that we would do this budget neutral. Obviously, it's not all worked out. It isn't all worked out. We know that. You've been telling us that. We know that too. But nothing, no change in education is ever worked out from A to Z at the front end. I appreciate the gentleman who got up and said, I don't want my kids to be the guinea pig. You know, I mean, if you think this isn't a good idea and you think that that's what it's about, I get that. But we really do believe that there is a relationship between time and learning, and it goes beyond how many hours there are in a day, and it goes to how do we chunk that time. I don't want you to think that what I'm saying means that we're pushing for anything beyond this year, because we have not made that decision. Will we continue to have conversations, discussions with you about the relationship between time and learning? Yes, we will. We hope that this is just the beginning of an ongoing discussion about how time and learning are related. Air conditioning is a problem we have now. This is, you know, like if you want to look at it, you know, one of the things that has come out of this is we've learned that currently we have classrooms that are way too hot in sometimes April, sometimes May, sometimes June, and sometimes August and September. If you guys remember, last year between like June 10th and August 12th, we wouldn't have needed any air conditioning. But in September this year, on the first day of school, on August 28th, I think, when I was doing my walkabout, I can tell you I was in a lot of classrooms that were mighty warm. By the afternoon of that day, it was too warm for kids and for teachers to be doing their best work. So what does that mean? That's a problem we have now. We need to figure that out. Okay, thank you.
Richard Fox, parent and resident of Shelburne. If I could, first off, thank you for the presentation, and specifically Mr. Barone for asking us to go back to, in my case, a while when we were in school, and it actually brings me right back here, exactly plus or minus 6 inches. And what I remember the most is coming back at the end of the summer feeling reinvigorated and ready to actually learn, and feeling by the time of October rolled around that I was only barely hitting my stride and getting into the system and getting things rolling and starting to understand what was going on with the current class year. A lot of what we've talked about so far, at least, has been focused on high school age students, and I think it's important that we recognize this affects even younger kids, and younger kids, anecdotally speaking, need even more adjustment time because they're not quite perhaps as with it as your teenagers are. But again, looking at the presentation, hearing what the stated goals were, I couldn't help but look and see that almost every single one of those goals can be adequately addressed by a good and fulfilling summer if you have good programs out there. And so to the extent that you folks are speaking with community members, community entities, I would submit that's the angle you should be focusing on. You're putting the cart before the horse here. The calendar should be driven by the curriculum and be driven by the goals for our students. And so with that in mind, I'd respectfully suggest that whether it's next year or 2 years down the road, when you folks start reconvening on this notion, number one, please, more transparency. The appearance of impropriety sometimes is worse than the impropriety itself. And you folks did not do yourselves any great services by what happened. By suggesting that you're potentially implementing it in 2014 and not really speaking to all of us until the fall of 2013 is absurd, especially when you're talking about something that's so broad sweeping as a calendar change which impacts every facet of our lives financially. It affects court decisions. It affects a boatload of different things out there. And so we need to have more time to digest and to discuss. Secondly, recognize the curriculum really it should be your focus, in my opinion. You need to focus on what our kids are learning and how they're learning it, and then determine how much time and how that time is utilized appropriately. Not crank out a calendar and say, well, we'll pigeonhole things in somehow. And then finally, we've heard some talk about other countries and how they do it, and I think that's great. We certainly should be looking at other countries. But I would respectfully submit that our children are not numbers on a standardized test, and we should be focusing on making them productive members of society, not something to beat the Norwegians or the Finns, because I could give a damn about the Norwegians and the Finns with all due respect. I want my children to do well, just like the opportunities I had here at CVU. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Servin. I'm a parent at Charlotte. I also work in the school in Charlotte. A couple things. One is that clearly there are retention issues over the summer. I see it in my own kids. I would never argue that. Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't see how 2 weeks changes that. And unfortunately, since we can't begin to think about adding days of school anywhere, whether it's longer days or longer school years, 2 weeks doesn't seem to me to be enough to make a difference on that score. Then completely separately from how this affects our students in the classroom, a big concern I have is how it affects the broader community and beyond in the summer. There are so many camp programs, day camps, sleepaway camps that rely on kids being available for their programs for 10 weeks in the summer. We cut 2 weeks out of that. And what's going to happen to these organizations and these camps? They won't be able to afford to stay open. So it's much bigger. It goes beyond what happens here in our classrooms to, businesses. So that's all.
Thank you. I appreciate all the speakers for really touching on a wide range of issues. That's great. That's the goal. Let's keep going in that direction.
Hi, I'm Carla Bond from Shelburne. I am a former classroom teacher and parent, and I think everyone in the room would agree that the concept of personalized learning is a very good concept, but I think everyone's wondering why that can't happen with the current calendar. It's long been my belief, through the years I was a classroom teacher, that every student should be on an IEP. Every student should be known by their teachers what their strengths and weaknesses are, how they learn best, and whether they need remediation or acceleration should happen on a daily basis, not in week blocks of intercessory periods. And that is meaningful learning. When you're teaching kids on a daily basis and you're teaching them the way they need to be taught, it becomes meaningful, and then retention becomes another discussion. They're not going to lose as much over the summer if the learning they've had over the course of the year has been meaningful. And you asked what do you remember about your school days? Well, I don't remember a lot, but you know what I do remember? I remember those periods of time that were meaningful to me. I remember teachers that impacted my life, okay, and did things that to this day I remember very vividly. I think those are the types of experiences our kids need, and they need them on a daily basis. And I think they carry them through the summer. And look, everyone in this room has survived this calendar. you have successful professionals, you have very successful parents. We all survived this, and our kids are surviving a lot worse things. I won't get into that, but one question I have, and I really would like this addressed, okay? Because I think this is important. We keep hearing there's research to support this, there's research to support this. I have seen nothing, nothing. I would like specific research that supports this calendar.
Thank you.
Was I holding it too close? Oh, can you hear me okay? So in terms of the research question you just asked, we want to be really clear. John has said this, I've said this, I've written about this. There is no exact student achievement research that says, let me finish, the 100-year-old calendar that we have now supports student learning, nor is there any research that significantly shows this calendar will support more learning. It's what you do at the time, as you mentioned, other people have mentioned. And the idea of the intersessions, as I said before, is where we think we can get our bang for our buck. Let us be clear. This committee of 6 superintendents was given the principles and said, forget what exists now. Create a calendar that you think would be better, but still hold to 175 days. That's what we did, to the best of our ability.
May I just, so you're saying then, I'm sorry, if I may?
Sure. Absolutely.
So you're saying then that there is research that shows that intercessory periods may have an impact on student learning?
There is a lot of research that shows things like reteach has that big impact. You want to do reteach, absolutely, during the school day, during the regular cycle. But if you have kids where, we want to get away from the situation where learning is the variable. We want time and support to be the variables. Some kids need more time than others. And intercessions is just a way to be able to give kids more time, just like we try to do in summer school right now. And we think that time would be more effective. Doesn't mean that we're right, but that's what we think.
Personally, I would appreciate it if there was more information on that, if that's really, what you're trying to, the plus to all of this, because I think there's a lot of questions about these intercessory periods. A week of time, a lot of people question what the worth is in that. So if there's research to support that, I think it would be helpful if you put it out there.
And the last thing about that intercession piece is that the other thing that makes it really hard for the superintendents is all 16 are in different places in terms of intercessions. So I know in Franklin Northeast what I'm going to do if this was a calendar. Our school boards know, our teachers know, because we've discussed and we've planned it. Not every place is in that same boat. So it may be different in other places. And when you talk about a regional calendar, that is a reality that you have to think about. Some superintendents have said they would just change, perhaps would just change the calendar, and that's it. And what I've said publicly, if you look at a cost-benefit analysis, there's no way we should change the calendar if we're not going to use that intercession time effectively.
I don't know who came first.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you? So I've got a bit of a curiosity question. I have no idea if this is a good idea or a bad idea.
I honestly don't know enough about it yet. So it sounds like what we're trying to solve, though, is a knowledge retention problem. And it seems like the conclusion that's been drawn, or the correlation, is that a calendar is the answer to a knowledge retention or a knowledge problem in the first place. What I'm wondering about is, and my wife, as a former teacher, I'm certainly not going to make this statement to say that there's something wrong with our teacher. Hi, Catherine, how are you? Good. Not trying to make a statement about quality of teachers or not, but I'm curious. What is the performance management rate of poor teachers being managed out of a system as compared to kind of like the private sector or the business sector? And again, there's not a statement trying to say that we have a lot of bad teachers. I'm just curious, what is the percentage difference? Because I don't know if this is a knowledge retention problem, or if it was that the knowledge never got there problem, or it was a curriculum problem. I have no idea. So what does that percentage look like? Like, out of curiosity, the gentleman from Essex, how many people were performance managed out of your district? How many teachers last year? Sure. I have no idea.
Not to say none.
That's proud to say. Wow. There's got to be, I mean, statistical analysis of anything would say there's always failure points. Okay.
I'm starting my 4th year, and I think of my teacher colleagues as top shelf.
Wow.
We have teachers who need extra support, absolutely. Do you need extra support in your business practice or in private practice? Absolutely. So we have a system in place that supports good teaching. And I think calendars notwithstanding, the most important thing that's in the lives of kids is good quality instruction. We know that teachers is the goal to get there. So I don't think this night is about talking about, and I don't think that's where you want to go.
No, I'm not trying to pick on teachers.
There
I'm
are
just...
multiple factors that contribute to regression. And whether or not kids leave, all kids in 5th grade leave going the same thing on June 19th every year, there's probably some variance there, but I would argue that it's not necessarily about the teacher.
Sure, it's just, exactly, and I'm not trying to go and pick on teachers. Love teachers. My wife's a teacher. I love her. But what I am trying to put out there is I've always been very curious about how in the business sector, which is the real life sector, we end up having to performance manage people, and that performance management means trying to help them. But at some point after some period of trying to help them, they're maybe not the right fit. And I'm curious if the education system has that same outlook of moving those teachers along and opening it up for perhaps fresh people. And I'll take my comments back there. Thank you.
One of the challenges we've had as a group is it's actually 17 superintendents, so we probably represent 3 counties and over probably 40 towns. And so trying to get to yes on something like the calendar has been somewhat of a challenge, I must say. But to answer your question more specifically, the State Board of Education has really had a lot of, I think, substantive discussions about teacher evaluation systems. And the guiding principles that are informing our thinking at the local level at this point is factored into the performance of students as an indicator of whether or not instruction is working for kids. So we're moving away from a model in Vermont in a way, but it's not about evaluating teaching, it's about evaluating learning. And so that nexus is stronger now through the state board guidelines, which is, again, helping inform our thinking at the local level. But again, as a state of Vermont, we're all over the place in terms of how we're actually executing those guidelines by the state board.
Thank you. So there are quite a few people remaining who would like to speak, and I believe they put their names on the list primarily to focus on this calendar topic, so we're going to try to get back in that direction. And let me just give the next few names. And what was the name? What was your name? The last speaker. Yeah. Scott. So are you Chris?
I'm Chris.
Okay, so the next people are Emily Coffin, Chris Falk, and Greg Goldman.
Hi, I'm Chris Berger from Shelburne. I'm a father of kids both in elementary school and now here at CVU. And I'm also on the faculty at UVM, so I'm quite familiar with both education and research. And I do think it's important to come back to this research piece because we're talking about some fairly drastic changes here. And I, for one, don't want to be stuck in the status quo just because that's the way it always was, if there are better ways to do things. But I also don't want to do something that is going to be very disruptive for a lot of people without really good reason for doing it. And I realize, particularly in low consensus areas of research like education, that anybody can probably find a piece of research that will support their point of view. But I do think this comes back to at least trying to make an informed decision on this and maybe informing, educating all of us. And this gets back to pluses and minuses. Everything is always in the world about advantages and disadvantages. And I think what a lot of people are feeling is that they're only really being shown one side of this, and that there should be information out there in terms of research where people have tried this before, or if we're talking about the intercessions, what does the research say, positive and negative, about different models of doing that. And I realize this is asking a lot. But, I want to go into this with an open mind. But that means understanding what the research says, as nefarious as that can be sometimes, though, in terms of what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of what's actually being proposed from an educational point of view. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Coffin. I'm a junior at CVU. I'm from Heinsberg. When I first heard about Calendar 2.0, I was pretty put off by it. I didn't want to lose summertime, and I thought that adding more time in between our school sessions, would it really be gaps in knowledge for kids, like issues that, or points that have been brought up tonight? But these intersessions really have the potential to benefit high school students in particular, and I completely recognize that a lot of you are parents of young kids who will eventually be high school students and be in a group of kids, and the competition level to get into college is going to keep going through the roof. And I really think that these intersessions are going to boost and put our kids especially at an advantage by allowing time to catch up on homework, allow opportunities to go out into our communities and apply learning. These enrichment programs in elementary and middle schools especially have become more and more scarce. When I was young, I really benefited from some awesome enrichment programs, but I see my younger brother now who's still in middle school, and they've kind of disappeared, which is really unfortunate. And hopefully these intersessions will have the potential to bring some of those back. Having kids go out and apply what they're learning in the classroom to real life situations is incredibly beneficial, and I don't think that high school students now are really inspired or motivated to be intellectual risk takers and to take advantage of what our communities have to offer and figure out what they want to do in their futures, which I really think these intersessions have the potential to help figure it out. Thank you.
So I'm going to read a few more names, and then I'm really hoping that people will try to keep their comments brief. And again, new, if you have something new to say. So Russ Caffrey, Steve Conowitz, Jeff Martin.
Hi, I'm Chris Paul.
Great.
Charlotte, I was on the list before.
Sit close to the mic.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with the goals you are trying to reach with the Calendar 2.0 proposal. But I'm wondering if perhaps we couldn't address some of those, like increased academic performance at all levels and reducing the number of broken up weeks we have and maximizing teacher-student time. We could address many of these in our next round of negotiations with the teachers union. I think that if we looked at perhaps keeping our schedule we have now and having teachers come in over winter break or spring break and take care of all of the professional development time and in-service days and NEA meetings and so on. In those times, we could have maintain full-day weeks. And I think most of the people in this room had parent-teacher conferences either before or after school. That we have to shut school down and send kids home and have parents come out of work to attend parent-teacher conferences seems incredibly inefficient. As does perhaps professional development days in general. I think someone spoke to using a business model for some of our decisions, and in the business community, if there's a professional development need, the employee makes a case for that, takes it to supervisors, and uses that opportunity to persuasively make an argument that this is something that's going to benefit all stakeholders. Here, just closing down the system and administering professional development to everyone, whether they need it or not, seems very inefficient and unfair to our kids. To have the school shut down last year for 2 days so teachers could attend a voluntary one-day NEA conference, again, it just seems like a very poor use of our time, and I'm hoping we can make some changes that'll maximize the efficiency of the schedule we now have, and again, hopefully address some of these problems at no cost.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Greg Goldman. I'm a junior here at CVU, and I'm from Williston. And I believe that I can speak from a lot of students here at CVU that I fully support this calendar. Now, I believe that the pros of this system completely outweigh the adverse effects. And the purpose of this is that we are attempting to benefit the education of students. So my question is, why are we not fully considering their opinions? Because I believe that most of us do support this. I am in most likely the most stressful year of my high school career. I participate in 3 sports. I'm taking APs, multiple clubs, student council, and I think that we could really take advantage of these intersessions to help catch up. By this point in October, I am doing 4 hours of homework a night, 10 hours of homework on weekends. And I think that it would be highly beneficial to be able to utilize these intersessions to catch up, to take advantage of further academic activities that are not in the current spectrum of our education. And even, for example, school trips. Currently, in February vacation, we'll be missing up to a full week of school for these trips. Even things like that could use these 2-week or shorter intersessions that would help to alleviate some of the pressure on students and to sort of streamline these systems.
Thank you. Thank you for taking some time out there. Okay, we are approaching 8. I only have 3 more names to call. Can we just finish our list here? Okay. So the last names I have, Rob O'Neill, Ron Gagnon, Naomi Burrell. I don't know if I called Ben Gillian. That's another name.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Konowitz. I am a parent and a teacher here in Chittenden County. And I am fully in support of reform and for timely assessment and for interventions, timely interventions. I make a habit of it every day in my classroom. But I keep getting sort of caught up in the logistics of these intercessions. And so that's what I want to bring up, so that I'm happy to hear you're going to put it off another year so you can think about these. And I haven't heard anyone else comment about these, so I want to bring them up. The first thing is, I'm concerned, I know teachers need every moment of the time on, the 7 weeks on or whatever, to teach. And then how is it going to be possible for them to assess well, then look at the data, then tell the families quickly that their child will need to come back for an intercession over the next week or 2 weeks, so that the family can then plan. I'm also concerned, data shows consistently that the number one most important thing that affects a child's education is their teacher. And I'm worried that the right teacher will not be there for the intercessions. So how do you get the right teacher with the right background, with the right relationship with the child? Struggling children who care about relationships most with their teachers, and so that those intercessions will actually be helpful to them. The last thing I would just like to know eventually, once if this goes forward and you think about it, whether the October week, it's a single week, is that going to be an intercession, or is that going to be a recharging time? Because if it's one or the other, that's a long period of time without intercession or recharging, whichever way it goes. Yeah. So just some things to think about. Thanks.
Great questions. Okay, yes.
I'm Russ Caffrey, and I have the unenviable position of following the 2 previous speakers at this microphone who did such a great job tonight. I'm a Shelburne School Board member. I've been on the board about 8 years. I've been on the CSSU board for about 6. And I wanted to thank the superintendents for coming out here tonight. That being said, no question you guys shot yourself in the foot by attaching that 2014-2015 school year to it. And it's had the unfortunate consequence of I guess some of the public discourse getting out ahead of where the process is. And, you've got to now kind of make up for that. As I said, I've been on the board a long time. I don't know whether I support this or not. There's a lot of fellow board members here in the audience tonight. Probably some of them feel the same way. So there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. But at the same time, these education leaders here are the same people. I think most of the people here like, or some cases even love the schools. They're the same people who are, in large part responsible, or some part responsible for it, along with the faculty and staff in all of our buildings. So I guess I would ask people to try to keep an open mind, to let the process play itself out, and to see what happens. I was on the Shelburne board when we went to full day K, and you would have thought the world was going to end, okay? And granted it affected a much smaller, segment of the population, only families that had kids in kindergarten, but once we got into it, people loved it. We didn't hear boo. I'm not saying the same thing would happen if we changed to this calendar, just asking people to keep things in perspective and to let the process play itself out. So, thank you.
I just want to take a minute to thank the students for their courage to stand up and tough crowd. So, and I think we can all agree that we're all here to try to improve the education for all children. So we have common ground. But I think the challenge has been that we created a task force to change the calendar as opposed to creating a task force to improve education. And I think we all would really love to find ways to innovate in the schools, and I fully would support that. What I'm missing from this whole proposal is alternatives and documentation and an opportunity to vet those proposals and find the best ones that are going to roll out and actually improve, with empirical data, the lives of our kids. So I hope that you will actually take a moment to look at those alternatives and present them to this body here. So when you have that opportunity, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Martin. I'm a parent of 2 children in Charlotte. I want to make a comment and ask a question, and it relates to the challenges that families who are economically challenged, how they're going to be able to manage the changes within this calendar. I'm hearing clearly tonight that this is a process and that there are a number of pieces that need to come into place. But in my work as a child psychologist, one of the things that I see over and over again is the stress that children incur from their parents when their parents are feeling very, very stretched. I suspect that we're not hearing loudly enough from single parents this evening, for example, who can't be here because they need to be home caring for their children, from parents who are working a night shift, for parents who just cannot make a forum like this. And I don't know what that has looked like at your other forums, but I think we all want to ensure that their voices are being heard, and that as it is, what I hear from parents is that they feel very stretched even in those days when there are teacher conferences, for example. How are they going to cover that? Many parents have 2 weeks of vacation a year, maybe 3 if they're fortunate. Having to cover more days during the school year means that they may not have a summer vacation with their kids in the summer. And I'm not in any way expecting that you've not thought about all of this, but my question is it possible, if this calendar goes forward at whatever point in time, that as you're putting pieces together, that your first priority is to be thinking about families who are economically challenged, and that you're ensuring that there are resources in place for those families so that they're not stretched even further than they already are? Because as much as you and all of us are concerned about the best interests of our children, those children are going to incur more stress and more difficulty if their parents' needs are not taken care of in this process. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Naomi Burrell. I'm here as a parent and also as the principal of an after-school religious education institution in Burlington. So it seems to me, and I know somebody used the phrase before, that you definitely put the cart before the horse. I hear a lot of maybes, a lot of, well, this could be, a lot of, it's a possibility. If I went and said to my constituents and gave them that kind of proposal as a principal of a school, I'd probably lose my job. And I mean that in all honesty. I'm not trying to be flip here. It seems to me that, yes, if this is actually a proposal, and it feels to me like you have definitely backpedaled. I heard this was happening. This was going to happen next year, and maybe that was misinformation. But now it definitely seems to be a proposal, and the fact that you actually had to make a decision this past week that it isn't going to happen next year leads me to believe that it wasn't a proposal, it was a fact. So I'm wondering how you can have a fact without putting your horses in front of your cart. You say there could be. You say that we're not expanding the school year, but you are. By using those intersessions as teaching time, you are extending the school year. You are moving into that free time. And therefore, how can it be a zero budget difference? What's going to pay for those? I don't understand. The math doesn't work for me. I won't go into the things that other people have said in terms of how do parents cover that time, how do they pay for it, where's the transportation. But as the principal of this other institution, I wonder, I have kids coming from not just this area, I have people coming from other places where they will not be going according to this calendar. Well, you're gonna make my life hell. So, again, I'm not even saying that this is a bad idea. I don't know yet. But I really think that if it truly is a proposal, go for it. Come back to us with information, a plan, a budget, not ifs, not maybes, but here is what we have. Here are your options. This is how we're going to pay for it. And then maybe we'll have something to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have 2 more people to speak, and I just want to thank you for the quality of your listening, which is really, really fabulous. So I know we're losing people who have to leave, but we have a couple more speakers, and it would be great to get them our attention. Sorry, we have 3 more speakers. That's all. Okay, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Ben Gillum. I was an educated primary, secondary, undergraduate, graduate school here in Vermont. I'm a former elementary educator, a former school board member, a parent of a junior here at CVU, as well as a 3rd grader in Essex Town. And I tell you all that because of a unique perspective I bring. I've attended all 4 of these forums, and I'd like to compliment John on his presenting and the work that you've all done. Although there has been miscommunication, as you have acknowledged, it's difficult work you do and very important work that you do. And I think as one of the gentlemen said earlier, we need to keep an open mind and not forget that. Interestingly, I would like to add that of all the speakers in each forum, 2 people have been pro the proposal, and they were both from Germany. I'd like to reference a book introduced to me by Superintendent Anders. It is titled "Schools Cannot Do It Alone," and it's written by Jamie Vollmer. If you've not read this book or heard of this book, I suggest you write it down. Again, it's called "Schools Cannot Do It Alone," and it's written by Jamie Vollmer. I would also recommend to the gentleman earlier who talked about performance management for teachers, because the gentleman who wrote it is a very successful businessman, and he found quite quickly that that's the wrong approach to take in education. Also, Mr. Vollmer writes in this book about the great conversation, and as Mark and I have discussed many times over many school board meetings, it's a conversation that needs to happen to help change our system of education. But there are 4 important things that need to happen for this conversation to occur. 1, we need to have a community understanding, which I've heard at all 4 of these forums. 2, we need to have trust. 3, we need to have permission. And 4, we need to have support. Once we can establish these things, then perhaps we can attempt to better the education for all of our children, and perhaps have forums on the other ideas that John mentions in addition to this calendar. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Sam Gilliam. I'm a junior at CVU. I've been to 3 different school districts, all in Chittenden County, and they've all gone by the same calendar, but have run very different programs. All calendars have worked. Being at CVU since I was a freshman, I can honestly say we can access basically anything within this calendar that we already have existing. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Grad Challenge, but that's about 45 hours of community service and self-learning. I'm involved in 4 or 5 committees right now that all work with academic internships, community learning, self-advocating. I think it's really possible to be done with the calendar we already have existing. The one thing that was questionable is how, you're saying for these 2 weeks of vacation or whatever, you mentioned that it would be time for students who need more help, but at the same time you said a great time for people to be on vacation. And if I'm getting more help for 2 weeks, it wouldn't be comforting to know that my buddy's in France for 2 weeks. You know, that's kind of, it doesn't seem like equal learning. I think I don't participate in any sports at CVU anymore. I used to play soccer here, but I'm a competitive swimmer, and that mostly takes place in the summer, and that would almost be destroyed by this calendar. I don't think that affects most of you, but I think there's a lot of programs that aren't considered and that can't be put into place during those 2 weeks because obviously we don't have access to a swimming pool. I just think some things should be relooked. Thank you
very much.
I have 4 kids, and some of them had to go to summer school, and they survived under the old calendar. Some of them had to be tutored, not because of the calendar, but for other reasons. One question that has not been asked, sports. If you're on a varsity sport and St. J is not on this calendar, how does that work out with the VPA, or how does that work?
Just say that.
You know, we've gotten that question a lot. I can tell you that the calendars right now in the state of Vermont do not line up. So currently, and I had 2 students who went through CVU and played a sport every single season, and I can tell you that in those, it spanned 7 years. We never were away February vacation, hoping that we'd be in the finals in hockey because it wasn't scheduled when we had our vacation. We never went away in April because there would be lacrosse practices. And even Thanksgiving. I mean, so that's not different. I mean, it would be the sports schedule that would get set, and then people would work their calendars around whatever sport their kid plays. And that's true today. That is true today.
Okay, I think that we need to, were you on our list? I think we need to wrap up. I'm sorry, but we do have, no, you want to hear her speak? Okay. But please no one else come forward, because then I'm put in the same position again. Go ahead.
I do think it's new information that hasn't been asked about.
Great.
When the idea was floated, the first time I heard about it, my name is Kristen Miscavage, and I'm from Heinsberg here. And when I first heard about the idea, you know, my first thought was, wow, that's different. But I left it there, and I said, well, I want to hear more about this. What is this going to do for us? Because I think we all agree we would like to see our children meet their individual goals. And so with that, I started asking teachers, other people, what do you think? And I still have not heard very much from teachers. And so that's my request, that in order to be supportive of this, I would really like to hear more from those people at the high school level, where I do see opportunities for high schoolers, and at the elementary level, and at the special needs level, and the middle school level. I'd like to know more about the districts throughout the country who have tried this. And it may not be quantitative research, but it'll be qualitative research on the impact to budgets, as well as how teachers have felt, and have they stayed with it, have they gone back? And my mind is still open. I would just really like to hear more of the qualitative experience of the rest of the country or other places that have tried it. Thank you.
So I want to again thank you for the quality of your listening and the quality of your comments. The variety was really important to hear. And Superintendent Elaine Pinckney, who welcomed us, would like to.
I do want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being thoughtful, honest, passionate, and sharing your ideas with us. Somebody mentioned that we were in part of a great conversation, and I do think it's a great conversation, and the person who pointed out tonight that it should be about improving education and not necessarily about a calendar. The calendar might be a byproduct of that. We agree. We do agree. And so thank you very much for being here. Very much appreciate being here.
Please do leave your comments and questions, if you wrote any, in the boxes on your way out.
Thank you.